I'm Elliot Clark, CEO of HRO Today, and this is my November column. It's on Wells Fargo Bank and cultural rot. I've been chided before by our editorial team for sinking my fangs into a provider here and there. I've rarely commented on the HR practitioner audience. Throughout 2020, there have been numerous important HR-related stories, from the coronavirus response and the role of HR to California AB 5, or the role of HR in social progress, for example. HR has been at the forefront of the business news. But one story that is an HR story that has been broken up into fang-sized bites is the complete and utter failure of cultural management at one of America's largest banks, Wells Fargo. How do we loathe the Wells Fargo? Let us count the ways. 4 years ago, Wells Fargo was embroiled in a series of awful headlines about creating fraudulent bank accounts and loan accounts. At the time, CEO John Stumpf, who later resigned in the wake of these scandals, blamed overzealous employees trying to maximize their commission accounts and succumbing to greed. This was cold comfort to the thousands of customers who had actively engaged in credit report repair and who were being harassed for loan payments on accounts they knew nothing about. Stumpf at the time promised an overhaul of the culture and the compensation schemes to avoid this happening in the future. Now hold that thought. As we are going to move chronologically, we'll have to come back to that issue of greed as we take a sidestep into a diversity and inclusion fiasco. Earlier this year, the new Wells Fargo CEO, Charles Scharf, commented on a call with employees that the bank had missed its diversity hiring goals due to a lack of qualified candidates. This story broke after African American employees who were disturbed by the call characterized it in news reports as quote unquote tone deaf. And given the racial tensions in North America this year, that seems appropriate. In my opinion, though, it's a bit of a different issue. CEOs are careful in public communications. They have teams of communications and HR professionals reviewing and polishing their messages. I believe the bigger problem here is that Charles Scharf believes this, or he would not have said it. In all likelihood, he heard from members of his own team, including HR, who believe it and have told him so. We all know diversity hiring is difficult. These groups are minorities, so less readily abundant than, let's say, majorities. In some cases, salaries for key skill sets are bid up. Some cases you have to hire for talent and groom for skills with good graduate recruiting programs. But if you can't make your goals, you set the wrong goals, or you simply didn't look hard enough. There are plenty of qualified candidates amongst the gender, ethnic, and racial minorities. So, strike two. This former headline about D&I and Wells Fargo was followed shortly by the revelation that more than 100 employees had been terminated for filing false payroll protection plan or PPP program applications, defrauding American taxpayers of millions of dollars. In a statement, CHRO David Galleries indicated the bank was cooperating with law enforcement investigations. Another example of rampant dishonesty. And when it involves one employee, you have a screening issue. When it involves more than 100, you have a cultural issue. We talk a great deal in HR about the importance of an ethical, responsible, and inclusive culture. We talk in HRO Today magazine about best practices and give the shining example on the hill. But in Wells Fargo, we see the other extreme. When the corporate culture is the equivalent of a dumpster fire, and it's ugly. In the midst of the current pandemic, there are critical issues of ongoing operations to be addressed. But CEOs, CHROs, and HR teams also need to make time to think about corporate culture on a long-term basis and evaluate screening not just for background, but for behaviors. They have time to think about training, recognition, and how to drive values-based culture. If you don't, this kind of de-evolution of culture will quickly occur. Think about the Wells Fargo brand and its history as one of the oldest in the nation, and how it originally conveyed an organization in whom you should deeply trust. Now it's become one where large groups of employees are investigated every few years by law enforcement, and they disrespect diverse populations. Sad, but most dumpster fires start small before they go out of control. Make sure you don't have one in the first place. This is Elliot Clark. I'm the CEO of HRO Today, and this is my November